My dear children, I have lived through so many springs, so many autumns, and now, at 79 years old, I want to tell you a true story from those distant times, specifically from the year 1963, when I was barely 17 years old. A story of faith, love, and betrayal lessons that life taught me more than half a century ago. You know, my children, each scar on my soul holds a valuable lesson, and this story, though painful, is the spiritual legacy I wish to leave you. Because, although the world may change in 1,000 ways, the essence of human beings remains the same. We continue to love, to feel jealous, to make mistakes. Each time I look into your eyes, I see curiosity and thirst for knowledge. You should know that, before all this modern technology, we too lived, loved, and suffered. Listen carefully, and through my story, learn to recognize what is true and what is false in this life. Several years passed living in that house behind the cemetery. I was barely 9 years old when we moved there, and we would live in that place until I was 18. Jack said it was an opportunity, that the rent was cheaper there, and that we could save to buy our own house someday. Catherine agreed, though not enthusiastically. Grandma Dorothy did not. She made the sign of the cross when she found out, and said that the place for the living is far from cemeteries. Jack, this isn't going to be right. Place of the dead is with the dead. Place of the living is with the living. She grumbled while helping to load the bundles with our clothes onto the cart. The house was simple, made of wood darkened by time, with a large yard where Mom immediately thought about planting some vegetables. It had 2 small rooms, one for my parents and another where I slept with my siblings and Grandma Dorothy. A living room that served for everything, a kitchen with a wood stove, and a washing area where Mom washed clothes. At the back of the yard began the cemetery wall, tall and painted white, always with damp spots at the bottom. The first day, I stood at the door looking at everything, feeling that strange smell of damp earth coming from the other side of the wall. Michael, my 6-year-old brother, immediately wanted to explore the whole yard, despite the asthma that occasionally attacked him and left Mom desperate. Lucy, tiny at 3 years old, clung to Mom's skirts, as if sensing that this was not a good place. "Mrs. Catherine, are you brave to come live here?" said Rose, our neighbor on the right side. A plump lady with gray hair, always gathered in a bun, who appeared bringing cornbread as a welcome gift. Many people are afraid of it. They say that at night they hear strange noises coming from the cemetery. "Nonsense," replied Dad, who was helping arrange our few pieces of furniture. "Dead don't make noise, and if they do, worse for them, having died and still not resting." He laughed at his own joke, but Mom made a face. She didn't like that kind of humor. She was very religious, prayed the rosary every night, and taught us to do the same. At nightfall, sitting at the table to eat the chicken soup that Mom had prepared, we heard the church bell in the distance, announcing the evening prayer. Grandma Dorothy made the sign of the cross and murmured a prayer. It was then that we heard footsteps on the gravel outside the house. "Good evening. Is anyone there?" A deep voice called from the porch. Dad got up and went to the door. It was a tall, thin man, with very white skin and gray hair. He wore simple but clean clothes and held a worn hat in his large hands, with nails always with dirt underneath, as I would later notice. "Good evening, David Foster, cemetery caretaker," he introduced himself. "I came to welcome the new neighbors." I later learned that David Foster had been a widower for many years. He had a daughter who lived in New York City with her husband and his only son, Alex, whom I would meet years later and who would change my life forever. "Jack," my father shook his hand. "This is my wife, Catherine, my mother-in-law, Dorothy, and my children, Hope, the eldest, Michael, and Lucy, the youngest." The man smiled, showing yellowish teeth, and nodded to everyone. His eyes were so light blue they seemed almost transparent. When he looked at me, I felt a chill run down my spine. "The house has been empty for a long time," said David. "I'm glad to have neighbors again. If you need anything, I live in that little house over there, at the cemetery entrance." Mom, polite as always, offered him a bowl of soup, but David declined, saying he was just passing by. Before leaving, he looked at the yard and commented, "That wall needs repair. If you want, I can help you on Sunday." After he left, Grandma Dorothy grumbled under her breath. "I don't like people who deal with the dead all day. They stay with the smell of death impregnated. It's the same as someone who works at the fish market, always smelling of fish." "Mother, for God's sake, don't start," Mom scolded her. "The man just came to be friendly." That first night I took a long time to fall asleep. From the bedroom window, I could see the white cemetery wall illuminated by the moon. The songs of night birds came from afar, and sometimes I swore I heard whispers and footsteps from the other side of the wall. Were they restless souls, like Grandma Dorothy said? Or was it just the wind swaying the branches of the trees? While trying to sleep, I heard Grandma Dorothy whispering to herself while setting up her hammock in the corner of the room. "This house isn't going to bring anything good," she murmured. "There's something wrong with this place. I feel it in my blood. These fools will see." It wasn't even a week before Mom realized we needed more money. Dad traveled selling products from a factory in New York City, lived on commissions, spent the whole week away and only returned on weekends with what he had managed to earn. Sometimes it was good, other times it barely was enough for food. "Hope I'm going to have to start working too," Mom told me while washing clothes in the yard sink. I was playing with Lucy, making rag dolls with scraps. "What we have isn't going to be enough." "Doing what, Mom?" I asked curiously. In our old town, Mom sometimes washed other people's clothes or cleaned houses, but here she didn't know anyone yet. "Sewing?" she said, wringing a sheet forcefully. "I was always good at it. I'm going to offer my services around here." Mom had brought her Singer sewing machine, a relic that had belonged to my father's mother. My grandmother was much loved and had died 2 years ago. It was black, with golden details already somewhat worn by time, and worked with an iron pedal that she operated with her feet. I loved the rhythmic noise it made when she sewed. The next day, Mom took me with her to get to know the center of the small town. We went by foot, about a 20-minute walk, me firmly holding her hand. As we walked, people looked at us with curiosity. "It's the new folks from the cemetery house," they whispered. The center was small, a square with a central church, the town hall, some stores, a farmer's market, a pharmacy, and Louie's bar, where men gathered at night. Mom visited the fabric store, talked with the owner, Paul, and left a sign posted on the market bulletin board advertising her sewing services. On the way back, we passed by cemetery caretaker David's house. He was in the garden pulling weeds. "Mrs. Catherine," he called when he saw us. "Everything all right? Did you get to know the neighborhood?" "Yes, Mr. David," Mom answered politely. "I went downtown to see if I can find sewing work." His light eyes brightened. "You sew? What a coincidence. I just needed someone like that." "Yes, do you need me to fix any garment?" Mom asked. "Not exactly." He scratched his chin. "It's something more specific. May I come by your house later to talk?" Mom accepted, and we continued on our way. I noticed that Grandma Dorothy was at the window when we arrived and didn't seem happy to see us talking with the cemetery caretaker. After lunch, David appeared at our house. He brought a package wrapped in brown paper. Mom invited him in and served him coffee. I pretended to play with Lucy, but was attentive to everything. "Mrs. Catherine, do you know how to make burial shrouds?" he asked directly. Mom was surprised. Grandma Dorothy, who was peeling potatoes in the kitchen, stopped what she was doing. "Burial shrouds? I've never made them, but it shouldn't be very different from making a simple dress or a tunic," Mom replied thoughtfully. Then David placed the package on the table and opened it. Inside was a white fabric, fine and of good quality. "Sometimes I need to get burial shrouds for people who die without family or resources. The lady who did this work moved to New York City. If you accept, I can bring the fabrics and pay you for the work." Mom looked at the fabric, then at Lucy and me. I knew what she was thinking. It was an opportunity to earn some money. "I accept, Mr. David. I just need to know the measurements." "Ah, that's easy," he smiled. "I'll bring you the measurements each time it's necessary. For now, to practice, you can make it with the measurements on this paper." He took a folded paper with numbers written in pencil from his pocket. Grandma Dorothy approached, drying her hands on her apron. "Sewing for the dead isn't good, daughter. It brings bad luck." David laughed, But it wasn't a cheerful laugh. "Nonsense, Mrs. Dorothy. The dead don't harm anyone. It's the living you have to fear." After he left, Mom unfolded the paper with the measurements. "It's for a small burial shroud. Must be for a child," she murmured sadly. "May God have him in his holy glory." That same afternoon, Mom started working on the Singer machine. She cut the white fabric and transformed it into a kind of long tunic with wide sleeves and an opening in the back to make dressing easier. I sat next to her, fascinated. "Do you want to learn, Hope?" she asked, pausing for a moment. "I do," I replied, although I was a little afraid to touch that machine. "Come then, sit here on my lap." She showed me how to place the fabric, how to turn the handle to make the needle go up and down, how to use the pedal to operate the machine. When we finished, the burial shroud was ready, white, immaculate, waiting to dress someone who would never rise again. The next morning, David came to pick up the burial shroud, examined Mom's work carefully, and seemed satisfied. "Very good, Mrs. Catherine. You have a good hand for the work." He paid in cash, more than Mom expected. When he left, she counted the bills with satisfaction. "With this, we already have enough to buy food for the whole week, Hope, and there's even some left over." In the following days, other sewing orders began to arrive. A dress for the teacher's daughter, alterations for the market owner, pants for the pharmacist's son. But David's burial shrouds were the most frequent orders and the ones that paid best. One afternoon, while Mom had gone downtown to buy thread, David appeared with a new order. Grandma Dorothy was taking a nap, and I was the one who opened the door. "Hello, little one." He smiled. "My mother went to buy thread," I replied, a little intimidated by his light eyes that seemed to see through me. "Ah, what a pity." He seemed annoyed. "I have an urgent matter, a child's burial shroud. Can you give this fabric and the measurements to her when she arrives?" I took the package he handed me. It was wrapped as always, but there was something different, a strange smell, like candles and herbs. "Who is it for, Mr. David?" I asked, unable to contain my curiosity. "Who died?" His eyes became even colder. "A child from a ranch far from here." "You don't know him?" After he left, I stood looking at the package. Curiosity got the better of me, and I ended up opening it to see the fabric and the paper with the measurements. The fabric was white as always, and the measurements were strange, very small, even smaller than the clothes Lucy wore. I had already learned to read measurements with Mom. "What a tiny baby," I thought sadly. When Mom returned and saw the package, she became serious. "Another child's burial shroud. It's the third this month. It's for a very small baby." I showed her the paper with the measurements. She looked at it and frowned. That night, while Mom was working on the burial shroud under the dim light of the lamp, with the noise of the Singer machine filling the living room, Michael had an asthma attack. Mom had to stop sewing to attend to him. Grandma Dorothy prepared a peppermint tea and put hot cloths on his chest. "It's this place," grumbled Grandma while caring for the boy. "It's the proximity to the cemetery. It's not good for children to breathe this air." The next morning, I woke up to voices in the living room. It was David, who had come to pick up the burial shroud. Mom explained that she hadn't been able to finish it because of Michael's crisis. "My son had an asthma attack. I couldn't finish it." "I understand, Mrs. Catherine," he said, but his voice was tense. "It's a shame. It was urgent." "Can I finish it today?" Mom promised. "The burial is at noon," he replied. When David came to pick it up, he paid the agreed amount. "Are you learning your mother's trade, girl?" "Yes," I replied, feeling a chill in my stomach. "Excellent. It's good to pass knowledge from mother to daughter. The ancients knew the importance of that." That night, I dreamed of white fabrics that moved by themselves, as if dancing in the darkness, and in the midst of them, light eyes watched me, cold as ice. Saturday came, and with it Dad returned from his trip. He always brought something for us, the children. A sweet, a hair ribbon for me, a wooden car for Michael, a little doll for Lucy. This time he brought milk candies that melted in your mouth, a delicacy that didn't last long, but we sucked slowly, really savoring to make the most of it. "How was the week, Catherine?" he asked after storing the worn suitcase under the bed. Mom told him about the sewing she had managed to get, and mainly about the burial shrouds ordered by David. She showed him the money she had earned, which left Dad very satisfied. "See? I told you this was a good place, cheap and with opportunities." Grandma Dorothy grumbled something from the kitchen, but no one paid attention to her. In the afternoon, David appeared at our door as if he knew Dad had arrived. "Good afternoon, Mr. Jack," he said, extending his hand. Dad received him well, offered him coffee, and soon they were sitting on the porch, talking like old friends. David told stories about the town, gossip about the neighbors, and Dad laughed, finding it all very interesting. "You have to know Louie's bar," said David. "It's where we find out everything that happens around here. Do you want to go tonight? I'll introduce you to people." Dad accepted, enthusiastic about the idea of making new contacts that could help him with sales. They left together after dinner, despite Mom's disapproving look, who didn't like when he drank. That night I took a long time to fall asleep. The room was hot and Michael was snoring softly in the bed next to mine. I got up to drink water and heard voices in the yard. I looked out the kitchen window and saw Dad returning with David. The two were walking a bit crookedly. They had clearly drunk more than they should. The next day, at Sunday lunch, Dad seemed different, more serious, thoughtful. He didn't play with me or Michael, as he used to do. When Mom asked if he had a hangover, he denied it. "I'm just thinking about business, Catherine. David showed me some interesting opportunities." "What kind of opportunities can a cemetery caretaker offer, Jack?" asked Grandma Dorothy with that direct way she had. "He knows everyone in this town, Mrs. Dorothy. He knows who needs what. That's good for sales." From that Sunday on, Dad began to go out with David every time he returned from a trip. He would come home late smelling of whiskey and cigarettes, saying things that didn't make much sense. Mom didn't like any of that. David's orders continued to increase. Burial shrouds for adults, for the elderly, for children and babies. I helped Mom with almost all of them, holding the fabric, learning to cut to the right size, sometimes even making some stitches when the work was simple. 2 years passed like this, me studying and helping at home and with the sewing. One day, I remember it as if it were yesterday, the day our fate changed course. Dad arrived one Friday afternoon, carrying that worn suitcase as always, but without any gift for us. He had an expression on his face that I had never seen before. It seemed like he had aged 10 years in a week. "Catherine, it's over," he told Mom, his voice broken, dropping the suitcase on the wooden floor. "The factory in New York City suddenly closed. They fired everyone." Mom stood still with the cloth in her hand, as if she hadn't understood well. Grandma Dorothy, in the corner of the living room, made the sign of the cross and murmured some prayer. I felt a chill in my stomach. Even at 11 years old, I knew that meant trouble. "And now, Jack, what are we going to do?" asked Mom, her voice low, almost a whisper. That same night, as if he had a sixth sense, David appeared at our door. He was holding a bottle of whiskey and that yellowish smile. "I heard the news, Mr. Jack." "A shame," he said, entering without being invited. Dad confessed that he had stopped by Louie's bar first. He himself had spread the news. "But maybe it's fate. I need an assistant at the cemetery. The work is not difficult, and the town hall pays reasonably well." I saw Dad swallow hard. He had always been a cheerful, talkative man. He liked to tell jokes and laugh out loud. Cemetery caretaker didn't suit him at all. "I don't know, Mr. David. Think of your family, man," the cemetery caretaker insisted, pouring the whiskey into a glass that Mom brought reluctantly. That night, after David left, I heard my parents talking in the kitchen. Mom was crying softly. Dad was trying to calm her, saying it would only be for a while, until he found something else. In that moment, I understood how quickly our lives had changed. Dad, who had been a traveling salesman with dreams and ambitions, was now forced to work under David as his assistant. It wasn't just a job change, it was as if David had gained power over our entire family. First through Dad's employment, then through the burial shrouds Mom sewed, and now I wondered what else he would take from us. The next morning, he left with David to learn the job. He returned quiet, with dirt under his nails and a strange smell on his clothes. He bathed, but still, it seemed that something had stuck to my father. It wasn't just the smell, it was as if a shadow had attached to him. Everything was very fast. In 2 weeks, Jack, who had always been a salesman, became a cemetery caretaker's assistant. At first, he tried to maintain the good humor as always, telling some joke at the table at dinner time, tickling Michael, playing with Lucy. But little by little he became quieter. When he came home, he went straight to bathe. Sometimes he stayed so long under the water that Mom would go knock on the door, worried. Money began to come more easily. Besides Dad's salary at the cemetery, the orders for burial shrouds continued to increase. Mom sewed day and night, and I helped more and more. Sometimes, when the pile of orders was large, Mom would let me use the Singer machine alone. "You have a good hand for sewing, Hope," she would say proudly. The years passed quickly in that house behind the cemetery. I barely noticed when Michael stopped being the thin, asthmatic boy to become a quiet young man, just like Dad. Lucy no longer clung to Mom's skirts. Now she helped with all the chores. And I, without realizing it, turned 15. 15 years old? Said Grandma Dorothy, looking at me with those eyes that seemed to see beyond what was in front of her. Dangerous age for a girl. Age to start perceiving the world and being perceived by it. It was at the St. Mary's Church fair that everything began, even before I knew who he really was. After much insistence, I had convinced Mom to let me go to the fair with Ellen, daughter of Rose, our neighbor. Grandma Dorothy had sewn me a floral chintz dress especially for the occasion, with a red ribbon at the waist. I felt pretty that night. The church square was all decorated with colorful flags, a large bonfire in the center, food stands and games everywhere, the smell of popcorn, punch, and cornbread, mixed with the perfume of the girls and the smoke from the boys' cigarettes, created an aroma that I still feel when I close my eyes and remember. The priest had hired an accordion player from out of town, and people danced animatedly. I had never been to a party like this, not without family. At home, with Dad increasingly quiet and somber because of his work at the cemetery, we had no reason to celebrate anything. I was standing near the love letter booth, watching couples dance, when I felt something strange. It was as if the air suddenly became heavier, colder, and all sounds diminished, as if someone had turned down the volume of the world. It was then that I saw him, on the other side of the square, a tall boy, with very white skin, almost as if he glowed under the moonlight, wearing dark clothes different from those worn by the boys of the town. He seemed not to belong to that place, to that party, perhaps not even to that time. But what caught my attention most were his eyes. Even at a distance, I could see they were of such a light blue, so intense that they seemed almost transparent, and they were fixed on me, as if in the midst of that crowd I was the only person visible to him. I stood paralyzed, unable to look away. My heart was beating so hard that it bothered me in my chest. It wasn't fear that I felt, although perhaps it should have been. It was something different, an attraction that came from a place within me that I didn't know. He began to walk in my direction, crossing the square. People seemed to step aside, making way for him, without even realizing they were doing it. Some rubbed their arms when he passed, as if feeling a cold breeze, but no one really noticed him. It was as if he were invisible to everyone, except me. "Hope," he said when he approached. His voice was soft, with an accent I didn't recognize. "I finally found you." I didn't ask how he knew my name, although I should have been surprised that a stranger would call me by my name. At that moment, it seemed natural that he would know it, as if we had known each other for a long time. "Who are you?" I managed to ask, my voice coming out almost in a whisper. "Someone who has been watching you for a long time," he replied, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Someone who came from far away because of you." I should have been scared by those words, but instead I felt a wave of heat rise through my body, even with the cold air that seemed to surround him. "Do you want to dance?" he asked, extending his hand. I didn't even think before accepting. His touch sent a hot chill down my spine. He led me to the center of the square, where couples were dancing. The music changed the moment we started to dance. The accordion player, who before was playing lively melodies, now played something slow, almost sad. "You're not from here?" I said. Not as a question, but as a statement. No, he admitted. I come from far away, but I'll stay for you. But you don't even know me. I know you more than you imagine, he said, making me spin in the dance. I know about your fears, your dreams. I know that you feel trapped in that house, that you fear that white wall, that at night you stay awake listening to the whispers that come from the other side. How could he know? I had never told anyone about the whispers I heard at night coming from the cemetery. I believed it was just my imagination. Who are you? I asked again, this time with more urgency. Someone who can take you from here, he replied. Someone who can show you a world beyond that wall, beyond this little town. The music suddenly stopped. He took my hands in his and came closer. His smell was strange, sweet and bitter at the same time, like dried flowers. I have to go now, he said, but I'll be back soon, and when that happens, you will have to choose. Choose what? I asked, confused. Whether you stay or come with me. He released my hands and walked away, walking into the darkness beyond the square. The world suddenly returned to normal. The sounds, the voices, the lively music of the accordion player, it was as if I had awakened from a dream in the middle of the party. Are you okay? Asked Ellen, suddenly appearing at my side. You look like you've seen a ghost. Maybe I did see one, I thought, but I didn't say anything. Who would believe me? 3 days after that church fair, I still couldn't get that strange boy out of my head. His blue eyes haunted me even in dreams. Sometimes, in the middle of sewing, I would stop, with the needle in the air, remembering his voice, his enigmatic words. I'll be back soon, and when that happens, you will have to choose. That Thursday afternoon I was hanging clothes on the clothesline when I heard the entrance gate creak. David, the cemetery caretaker, came accompanied by a young man. My heart almost stopped when I recognized the same young man from the fair, the same very light blue eyes, the same pale skin, the same way of walking, as if he barely touched the ground. Good afternoon, Miss Hope, greeted old David, removing his worn hat. My mother is in the kitchen, I replied almost without a voice, my eyes fixed on those of the young man who pretended not to recognize me. Mom came wiping her hands on her apron, looking with distrust at the visitors. Dad, fortunately, was working at the cemetery. Mrs. Catherine, said David, I came to introduce you to my grandson Alex. He arrived from New York City to live with me. Nice to meet you, replied Mom without much conviction. The pleasure is mine, ma'am, said Alex with that voice I already knew. My grandfather speaks very highly of your family. It's true, confirmed David. At the church fair on Sunday we were there. I told him about your family. I told him you were the daughter of my assistant, pretty girl and hard-working. But you didn't see each other there, right? I was frozen. What did he mean we hadn't seen each other? We had danced together. He had held my hands, had told me things that only someone who knew me well could know. How could he now pretend he didn't know me? No, replied Alex, looking me directly in the eyes, with a slight smile on his lips. I didn't have the pleasure. There were many people at the fair. But he already knew all about the girl, didn't he? Continued David, nudging his grandson. I always talk about the family of my friend, the cemetery caretaker. Jack is a good man. I felt a chill down my spine as he stared at me. Was he playing with me? Why was he pretending not to know me? Well, David spoke again. We came to see if you finished my orders. While Mom and David went to the sewing room, Alex approached me, pretending to look at the flowers in the yard. Do you know why I did that? He whispered so low that only I could hear him. Did what? I replied, also whispering. Pretend we didn't meet at the fair. Why? I asked, with my heart beating rapidly. Because what happened between us wasn't for others to see or understand. It was just ours. He smiled slightly. And because I wanted to see if you would also pretend, if you would keep our secret. Besides, my grandfather is very protective, and I didn't want him to know I had approached you without his permission. I observe, I learn about people. My grandfather David has taught me to read beyond words, and you, Hope, are special. Alex, let's go, called David, interrupting our conversation. I saw that my grandmother, always astute and distrustful, observed the boy with sharp eyes, like those of an eagle, as if seeing things that we didn't see. He walked away, but before leaving he took my hand discreetly. The same cold touch I felt at the fair. "We'll see each other more often now," he said, "and you'll have to make your decision, as I promised you." I stood watching them leave through the gate, with 1,000 questions in my head. Who was this boy really? Why did he disturb me so much? That night I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned in bed from one side to the other, remembering every word, every gesture of Alex. The next morning, when I went to fetch water from the well in our yard, I found Grandma Dorothy already awake, sitting on the bench in the yard, peeling potatoes with that old knife that only she knew how to sharpen. Her knotty fingers moved with surprising agility for a woman her age. "Grandma, you didn't like Mr. David's grandson, did you?" I asked, sitting next to her. She stopped peeling, looked at me with those deep eyes that seemed to see beyond the flesh, all the way to people's souls. She always had that gift. I know that type of man, Hope. Too handsome, too polite, always with an answer for everything. And those eyes, she shuddered, making the sign of the cross. Eyes like that I only saw once in my life, when I was a child. A man appeared at my father's ranch wanting to buy land. Everyone was charmed by him, except my grandmother, who said he had the mark. "What mark, Grandma?" "The mark of the other side. You're too young to understand, but people who aren't really people who have a pact." "A pact with whom?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "With the one who should not be named," she whispered, looking to the sides, as if the walls could hear. "The father of lies." I believed that Grandma was exaggerating, as always, with her old superstitions brought from the countryside where she came from. She was like that. If you gave her room on that topic, she would immediately come up with stories that made us doubt her sanity. But I quickly discovered what was happening with this Alex. He had something strange. That's for sure. But it wasn't anything from that other world that Grandma Dorothy always talked about. "Bad blood," she murmured that day. "Just like that man who appeared at my father's ranch when I was a girl." And she made the sign of the cross 3 times in a row, spitting to the side to ward off bad luck. It was then that I remembered a conversation I overheard between her and Dad on the house porch. Dad was smoking his leaf cigar, sitting on the bench, which with each movement creaked like a cemetery door. "He's handsome, isn't he, Jack?" she said to my father. "Be careful, Jack. That boy carries the devil's shadow. It's no coincidence that he came to end up right here, in this small town, right now." My father just nodded his head, silently agreeing. He didn't talk much during that time. Since he started working at the cemetery with David Foster, Dad withered like a plant without water, his eyes sunken like holes, his skin yellowish, his hair graying before its time. He no longer told funny jokes, no longer sang, no longer played with us. It seemed that he buried a piece of himself with each grave he dug. "David is sucking the strength out of him," Grandma would tell Mom when she thought we weren't listening. That's how those with a pack do it. They feed on the energy of others, like ticks on cattle. At that time, I believed that Grandma was exaggerating with her ghost stories. Now I understand why my grandmother distrusted David so much. Not only was he the cemetery caretaker, but he turned out to be Alex's maternal grandfather, although at that moment I still didn't know it. David Foster had planned everything from the beginning, approaching my family, offering my father work, and then bringing his grandson to meet me. But after meeting Alex, after having danced with him at the fair, I began to wonder if there wasn't some truth in all of it. Keep listening, and soon you'll understand everything clearly. Sometimes I get lost in the way I tell it, but it's all true. Then, one day I was helping Rose, our neighbor on the right side, to hang clothes on the clothesline. Her mother, Ellen's grandmother, Grace, a very old lady who lived in a chair on the porch, began to tell stories of the old days. "You are very young, don't you remember?" she said, moving her head with that hair as white as cotton. "But when I was young, there was a man who would appear at parties, a handsome boy with fair skin and very light blue eyes, whom nobody knew where he came from. He would arrive, ask girls to dance, tell them things in their ear that no one else heard." I froze at that moment. It was exactly what had happened to me the night of the church fair. "And what happened next, Mrs. Grace?" I asked, pretending not to be impressed. "Oh, my child," she sighed deeply. "Some girls fell ill, became pale, weak, as if they had lost their blood. Others disappeared. They went with him," they said, "and nobody ever saw them again. My cousin Divine was one of them." Rose, who rarely spoke of her mother's stories, interrupted her. "Mom, don't start with those ghost stories. You'll scare the girl." "They're not ghosts," insisted Grace with the stubbornness of the very old. "Ask any of the elders in this town. Everyone knows the story of the boy at the fair. He appears from time to time, always the same, always young." That kept going around in my head for days, until, thinking it through, it all made sense to me in my innocent eyes as a 15-year-old girl. Alex must have heard those stories when he arrived in town. Who knows, maybe his own grandfather told them to him. And since he was handsome, with that too white skin, those blue eyes of a clarity that almost hurt to look at, he decided to take advantage and stage that whole theater. Pretend that he was the boy from the fair to impress silly girls like me. Small town, without decent electric light, without a cinema, without any entertainment. Ghost stories were what we had to entertain ourselves, especially living near the cemetery. Look, if I had to tell you all the spine-chilling stories I heard there, we would have to divide my story into 2 or 3 parts. But I'm going to focus on my personal story. I'm only telling you this so you understand how I met Alex. It was then that I realized it all made sense. The stories about the mysterious boy who seduced young women at parties were real, yes, but not because Alex was some kind of supernatural creature. He had probably heard those legends when he arrived in town and decided to use them to his advantage. The scoundrel, clever as he was, realized that quickly. He knew that if he created all that mystery, girls would fall like flies to honey. When I understood that, after my enchantment faded, I laughed at myself for how foolish I had been, believing in ghost stories, almost letting my imagination convince me that Alex was some kind of demon or vampire. He was just an intelligent, charming boy who knew how to get attention, and he had gotten mine completely. I would even get distracted sewing the burial shrouds, which worried Mom. "What's so funny about clothes for the dead? Girl, have some respect." But at first, I didn't tell anyone what had happened that night at the fair, or what I thought about Alex. I kept it all inside me, like a sealed letter. I didn't tell anyone, not even Ellen, who had always been my confidant since childhood. Only later, when things got worse, did I finally confide in her. At that moment, I decided that I wouldn't be fooled again. The next time I saw Alex, I would show him that I wasn't as naive as he thought, that I had discovered his trick and maybe I would even have a little fun with it. But my plan to show him I wasn't foolish went out the window when he smiled. The truth is that I approached him, yes. And as much as I knew all this, nothing changed the fact that I kept falling in love with him. I couldn't help it, even knowing he was deceiving me with that mysterious boy story. "You're different from the other girls here, Hope," he told me one afternoon while accompanying me back from the market. "There's something in your eyes, an intelligence, a curiosity. No one had ever spoken to me like that before. At home I was just another mouth to feed, another pair of hands to help with the work. At school, which I barely attended, I was the cemetery caretaker's daughter, the girl from the cemetery house. But in Alex's eyes I was special. Mom immediately realized my interest in the cemetery caretaker's grandson and didn't like it at all. "I don't want you hanging around that boy," she warned me while we were cutting fabric for a new batch of burial shrouds. "He has the same blood as David." "What's wrong with Mr. David, Mom?" I asked curiously. "He's a man who can't be trusted," she replied, lowering her voice as if the walls could hear. "Your father changed after he started working with him. And that Alex, with those light eyes, is not of our people, doesn't belong to our world." "But he's different, Mom," I tried to argue. "He's educated, studied in New York City, knows everything." "Even worse," Grandma Dorothy chimed in from the corner where she was praying her rosary. "City-educated boy only wants one thing from country girls, and after he gets it, he leaves." But who at 15 years old listens to the advice of her mother and grandmother about boys? the prohibition only increased my desire to see Alex again. We began to see each other in secret. At first, we only talked on the paths between the house and the center. Then, the walks became longer, always careful that no one would see us. Until one day, behind the cemetery tombs, he kissed me. It was my first kiss. I felt as if the whole world had stopped at that instant. After that day, I couldn't stop thinking about him. We saw each other more and more, always in secret, behind the cemetery, in the grove near the Hudson River, even in the old church that no one went to anymore. And how we kissed, we embraced like two desperate people, he always wanting more. And I waging the war between desire and fear, because deep down, at the very bottom, I remembered what Grandma had said. After he gets what he wants, he leaves. So each time his hand went up a little more on my leg, I stopped everything. I always told him that only after marriage would he know what was underneath my dress. On one occasion, I asked him about that farce of our first encounter. He confessed that my father and his grandfather had talked a lot about me, that it had been easy. "What do you want from me?" I asked him. "Everything," he replied so directly that I was left breathless. "I want to know every part of you, every thought. I want you to choose to come with me when the time comes." "Go with you, where?" "Far from here, from this small place, from this small life. You deserve more, Hope. You deserve the whole world." He knew exactly what to say to a 15-year-old girl like me, raised in a house behind the cemetery, sewing clothes for the dead day and night. I dreamed of another life. And Alex offered me that with those hypnotizing blue eyes. In each encounter he talked more about that choice, about how he had plans, about how he would take me far away, about how we would be happy. He always ended up kissing me until I was breathless. And when I stopped him from going further, he would laugh and say, "The decision will be yours, Hope, always yours." When I turned 17, everything changed. It was spring. The flowers of the tree in front of the house were all yellow. Alex appeared one Sunday afternoon. He entered our yard all dressed up, with a starched white shirt and a package in hand. He greeted everyone politely and asked to speak with my father, alone. It was my official marriage proposal. It was a scandal at home after he left. Mom cried, saying I was too young, that I didn't know life. Grandma Dorothy said I was throwing my life away. "That boy has the devil in his body, Hope," she said, making the sign of the cross. "He's just like the one who appeared at my father's ranch when I was young. Handsome, educated, talkative. He deceived all the girls, then disappeared taking what he wanted. But I was determined. At that age, one believes they understand everything about life, that they know more than the elders. And Alex had a way of talking, a way of looking, that made me forget all the warnings, all the premonitions. What attracted me most about him, besides his beauty, was that cleverness. He only needed to look at a person to know if they were sad, if they kept some secret. With 2 or 3 questions, he discovered the entire life of anyone. At first, I believed it was some gift, like the ones Grandma said some people had. Then, I understood it was just observation. He paid attention to details that no one else noticed. A trembling hand, an evasive look, a change in voice tone. "How do you know so much about people?" I asked him one day while we walked secretly along the riverbank. "It's easy," he replied, taking my hand. "People want to tell their secrets. They just need someone who seems really interested in listening." That made me think. Would that be what he was doing with me too? Feigning interest to discover my secrets? Or would it be different? Would it be true love? But even with those doubts, even knowing that he might be deceiving me, I felt like the cleverest girl in the world just for having been the chosen one. Among all the girls in town, the ranch owners' daughters, the girls from good families, it had been me, the cemetery caretaker's daughter, the girl who sewed burial shrouds, whom he wanted by his side. We got married after almost 2 years of knowing each other, when I had just turned 18, a May afternoon in '64, a simple ceremony at St. Mary's Church with few guests. We didn't have money for a big party, or for an expensive wedding dress. Mom and I sewed my dress, a simple white one, but pretty, with some embroidery that Grandma Dorothy did. Alex rented a dark suit, Grandma Dorothy kept praying under her breath, as if protecting me from something. Mom cried throughout the ceremony. We didn't have a party afterwards, just a meal at home with family and a few guests. My father-in-law and mother-in-law came from New York City for the wedding. I hardly knew them, as they lived far away, and Alex had come alone to stay with his grandfather David. He had those blue eyes inherited from his mother, who in turn had inherited them from old David, her father. David had always shown a special interest in Alex, his only grandson. He had sent him to study in New York City, but when Alex turned 20, David insisted that he come to live with him. To learn the family business, he said, although it was never clear exactly what business he was referring to. Now I understand that David had plans for Alex from the beginning, plans that included me and my family. After the wedding, we moved to a small house near the center that Alex had managed to rent. It was small, with only 2 rooms, but to me it seemed like a palace. It was mine, ours. Alex got a job at Paul's fabric store. He didn't earn much, but it was enough to live on. I continued helping Mom with the sewing, but now I went to her house during the day and returned at the end of the afternoon to our little house. Life was simple. We didn't have much money, but we had love. And how much we had. Alex taught me things I never imagined about the love between a man and a woman. In the early days, we could hardly wait for night to come to be alone. Sometimes we didn't even wait when he came home for lunch. We made love right there, in our narrow bed, which creaked so much that I was afraid the neighbors would hear us. The first time was difficult. It hurt, as Grandma Dorothy had warned. Healthy man only thinks about that, hope, and it hurts. But afterwards, you get used to it. And I got used to it. After the first time, I discovered that what Grandma described as if it were a sacrifice that a woman had to endure was, in reality, one of the best things in life. Alex knew how to touch me, where to kiss me, what to whisper in my ear. When we were together like this, I forgot everything, the worries about money, the longing for my home, grandmother's warnings. There were only us and that fire that seemed like it was going to consume us completely. Alex, with all that mysterious air he had, was a good husband. He always returned from work on time, helped me at home, talked with me about everything. At night, when we went to bed, he would tell me stories about New York City, about the places he had known, about the things he wanted to show me someday. "When we save enough money, Hope, we'll leave here," he would say, playing with my hair. "I'll take you to see the ocean, the tall buildings of New York City, the stores full of pretty things." Sometimes on Sundays, we would go for walks by the Hudson River, take something to eat, spread a towel on the grass, and stay there talking, making plans. Alex talked about having children, about setting up his own business. I dreamed of a bigger house, with a garden where I could plant roses like the ones Grandma Dorothy cared for. Everything seemed so perfect that sometimes it scared me. Would it last? But the days went by, the months too, and Alex was still there by my side, working in the store, helping me with the sewing I did at home. After I got a used machine to increase our income, around that time, I started feeling nausea in the mornings. My breasts were sensitive, my belly seemed different. When I told Alex, he hugged me and spun me around the living room, happier than I had ever seen him. "We're going to have a child, Hope. A child." Life continued its course, simple but good. Alex, the work at the store, our baby on the way, the plans for a better life, the already large belly. I was anxious to meet our son. We didn't have money for a private doctor, so I did the follow-up at the neighborhood community health center once a month. They measured my belly with a measuring tape, listened to the baby's heart with a wooden device placed on my belly, and said everything was fine. The delivery was difficult. It started on a night of heavy rain, the kind that made the roof of our little house leak in 3 different places. Alex ran out to look for the midwife, Mary, a dark-skinned woman who had already brought almost all the children in town into the world. When she arrived, I was already losing strength from so much pain. "This child is coming sideways," she said after examining me in our bed. "It's going to be difficult, but God helps." It was almost 20 hours of pain. Alex stayed outside the whole time, as was the custom. Men couldn't see such things. Mom, Grandma Dorothy, Rose, and Ellen came to be with me. holding my hand, praying along with Mary. The room smelled of herbs that the midwife burned to facilitate the birth. When Matthew finally was born, I didn't even have the strength to celebrate. I was exhausted, sweaty, with pain all over my body. I heard his cry, weak at first, then stronger. Mary wrapped him in a cloth that Grandma had embroidered and put him in my arms for an instant. "He's a strong boy," said the midwife, "but you, girl, are going to need care." Later I found out that I had lost a lot of blood. For 3 days I was between life and death, with high fever and terrible pains in my belly. Alex sold the watch he had inherited from his father to pay for transportation. They took me to the doctor in New York City. Dr. Roberts gave me a penicillin injection and said it was an infection. "Many women die like this after childbirth," he explained to Alex, believing I was asleep and couldn't hear him. She was lucky. Lucky was that Matthew was all right. A chubby baby, with his father's blue eyes, a bit fussy but healthy. The problem was that my milk wouldn't come in. I tried everything. The teas that Grandma Dorothy recommended, the cleansings that Mary did, the hot compresses that Mom put on my breasts, nothing worked. "You have to give him a bottle," Mom said after a week of trying, watching the child cry with hunger. "If not, he won't recover." I wasn't satisfied. After all, when I was pregnant, I saw drops of milk that escaped, and after birth my breast seemed full, but despite looking engorged, the baby couldn't extract the milk properly. In those days, bottle feeding was almost a sin. They said that a mother who didn't breastfeed wasn't a complete mother, but between pride and my son hungry, I chose to feed him. Mom taught me to boil cow's milk, dilute it with boiled water, and give it to him in the glass bottle with a rubber nipple. The health center had begun to distribute a powdered milk, which was the most suitable formula for newborns. They said it came from the United States, but you had to queue at dawn to get a can, and there wasn't always enough. As I was still weak from the complications of childbirth, Mom began to come to our house every day. She brought Lucy with her, who at 12 years old was already becoming a pretty girl with long brown hair and Mom's big eyes. She adored her nephew, spent hours cradling him, singing the same songs that Mom sang to us when we were little. "He has Alex's nose, but the mouth is just like yours," Lucy would say, observing every detail of the baby. Alex had to go back to work shortly after Matthew was born. In those days, men didn't have leave or anything. Paul, the store owner, was even generous, giving him 3 free days so he could take care of me while I was in the hospital and make the necessary arrangements for our newborn son. Most employers didn't even give that. The person who saved me during that period was Lucy. Mom still had to take care of the house, of Dad, who continued working at the cemetery, and of the sewing, which was her livelihood. So my little sister would come after school and stay with me until nightfall. At night, my brother would pick her up. "You're teaching her to care for babies," Mom would say. "It's good for when she gets married." Little by little I got better, but I was never the same again. I always felt pains in my belly when the weather changed, when I exerted myself too much. The doctor said I might not be able to have more children, that I had been left with sequelae. Alex didn't complain. He said that Matthew was already enough of a blessing. The truth is that, even with all the difficulties, we were happy. Our simple little house, our son, our love that remained strong. Alex sometimes arrived with small surprises. A sweet from the store, a hair ribbon, a flower from the path. On nights when I didn't have much pain, we made love like before. "You're the woman of my life," he would whisper in my ear. "You and our son are everything to me." And I believed him. With all the strength of my heart, I believed that we had finally found our happiness. Matthew grew strong, despite the difficult start. Soon he was crawling all over the house, pulling tablecloths from the table, trying to eat dirt from the pot that Alex had given me. Like any first-time mother, I lived in panic, seeing danger in everything. In those days, there weren't those protections for outlets, window guards, none of that. We had to be very watchful all the time. 2 years passed and I became pregnant again. Matthew was almost 2 years old. He was already saying some words, running around the house and giving a lot of work. The news of the new pregnancy made everyone happy, but also worried them. The doctor at the health center had warned that it would be risky for me to have another child because of the complications of the first birth. "Take it easy this time, Mom," he would always say. "No lifting weights or standing all day." The family was always at home. Michael, my brother, who was already 15 years old, now turned into a hard-working young man, was already working at the market, but came on weekends, played with Matthew, helped Alex fix things around the house. Only Dad, who didn't come much, continued working at the cemetery with David, increasingly withdrawn, more distant. But when he came, he spoiled his grandson like no one else. My little one was the only one who could bring a smile to that face. Then there was Lucy, my sister, now 14 years old, very pretty, with hair down to her waist, a slender figure, wasp waist. She was always animated, smiling, different from everyone at home. It seemed she hadn't inherited the sadness that the cemetery had brought to the rest of the family. Lucy joked with my husband. At first, I thought Alex's interest in my sister was nice. He always asked how she was doing in school, brought her books to read, told her stories about New York City. It's good for her to have an example, I thought innocently, someone to motivate her to study. When I became pregnant with my second child, I didn't have the same energy to realize what was happening right in front of my nose. I had a lot of nausea, was always tired, fell asleep early. Alex came home later and later, always with excuses about extra work at Paul's store, or how he had stayed doing overtime organizing the warehouse. One day, I was so tired that I decided to take an afternoon nap, something I almost never did. I took advantage of the fact that Matthew had fallen asleep. It was my opportunity to rest a little. I lay down beside him and fell asleep instantly. I woke up to a strange noise in the living room. I got up slowly and went to see what it was. What I found scared me. Lucy was lifting her dress on one leg and showing those pretty thighs with her hands. And I saw my husband with that predator's face towards her, looking her up and down. He was looking at her. He wasn't so close, but it wasn't necessary. I knew that look well. It was the same one he had directed at me so many times when we were alone. That was enough for me to go crazy. I slapped him without thinking. Lucy started crying. Alex got up quickly, trying to explain himself. "Calm down, Hope. It's not what you think." Lucy had hurt her leg. She was showing me the scratch. "It's true, Hope," sobbed my sister. I scratched myself on the wire fence in the yard. I was just asking if I needed to put medicine on it. But I wasn't stupid. I might have been simple, without education, but I wasn't an idiot. There was no scratch on that leg. And that look of Alex's wasn't of concern, it was of desire. "Get out of my house," I shouted at him. "Get out and never come back." Alex said it wasn't a big deal, that I was exaggerating, that it was just a misunderstanding. Lucy ran out, crying. That night, when Matthew was asleep, we had the worst fight since we got married. "How could you?" I asked, trying not to shout so as not to wake the child. "My own sister, a child? Are you crazy?" he replied. "Are you seeing things where they don't exist? You're making up stories because you're pregnant, full of foolish jealousy." For a moment, I almost believed him, almost thought I had imagined it all, that the pregnancy was driving me crazy. But then I remembered that look, those hands of my sister on her own thigh, the way he looked at her. No, I hadn't imagined anything. From that day on, everything changed between us. It was as if a wall had fallen in the middle of our bed. Alex slept facing the wall and I facing the door. We hardly talked beyond what was necessary. He left early for work, returned late, ate dinner in silence and went to sleep. He no longer touched me like before. He said it was because of the pregnancy, that he was afraid of hurting the baby. The doctor ordered rest, he would say. Despite everything, I kept that secret to myself. I was ashamed to tell Grandma or Mom what they would think, that I didn't know how to keep my husband, that Lucy was more interesting, prettier than me. In those days, when a marriage went wrong, the blame always fell on the woman. It was then that I decided to tell Ellen, my childhood friend, the only person I could trust. By then she was already married. We saw each other one afternoon in her yard, while Matthew played with the chicks she raised. "Ellen, I need to tell you something, but it has to stay between us." I told her everything I had seen, how I felt, how things had changed at home. Ellen was shocked, with her hand over her mouth. My God, Hope. Look, with these men you never know, but you have to think about your children now, about Matthew and the one who's coming. You can't upset yourself like this. It's not good for the pregnancy. She was right. As much as it hurt, as much as I felt that anger every time I remembered the scene, I couldn't let that affect my baby. After all, I was almost 4 months along, the belly was starting to show. Lucy didn't return to our house after that day. I would see her sometimes on the street or when I visited Mom. She would lower her head, not look me in the eyes. She seemed ashamed, but I don't know if it was for what she had done or out of fear of me. I tried to move forward for my children, for Matthew, who now ran all over the house shouting, "Dad!" When Alex arrived from work, and for that baby in my belly, who was now 6 months old and kicking harder and harder. One day, I went to my mother's house, entered and found Grandma Dorothy. When she saw me, she stopped praying. Her eyes opened in a way I had never seen before. It was fear, surprise, and pity, all at the same time. "What's wrong, Grandma?" I asked, frightened. She shook her head, going back to passing the beads of the rosary. "Nothing, my child. I was just distracted." But I knew it wasn't that. Grandma Dorothy always had that gift of seeing things before others, of knowing things that no one told her. Her eyes had seen something that frightened her. "Tell me, Grandma, you're acting strange. Did something happen?" "Leave it, Hope," she replied, changing the subject. "How is my great-grandson? And is the belly all right?" I begged her to tell me what was going on, but she refused. But I knew, in the bottom of my heart, that she was protecting me from something because of the pregnancy. Mom entered the living room, hugged me, asked if I wanted coffee, all normal, but I also noticed something strange about her, a way of not looking me in the eyes, of talking too fast. Everyone in that house was hiding something from me. I decided to be more alert, to pay more attention. If there was something I had learned growing up near the cemetery, it was to notice the details, the silences, the looks that say what the mouth keeps quiet. One day, now almost 7 months pregnant, I put Matthew in the stroller and we went to visit Mom again. It was a Saturday afternoon. Alex said he would stay doing extra hours at the store, as always. I no longer believed those excuses, but I kept pretending I did. When I approached the cemetery, on the way to my parents' house, I saw Lucy come out of there. She didn't see me. She left quickly, almost running. I found it very strange. My sister never went to the cemetery. She always complained about the place. My mind raced with possibilities. Was she visiting Dad at work? Was she delivering something for Mom? The cemetery had always terrified her. She would cross the street to avoid walking by it. Yet here she was, leaving in a hurry with flushed cheeks and a guilty expression. My stomach knotted with dread, but I pushed those thoughts away. Surely there was an innocent explanation. She said it scared her. What would she be doing there on a Saturday afternoon? Something inside me froze, a bad feeling. Instead of going directly to my parents' house, I decided to enter the cemetery. I told myself that I wanted to talk to Dad, ask how he was, but deep down I knew I was looking for something else. I pushed Matthew's stroller along the stone path between the tombs. He was quiet, looking at the angel statues with curiosity. The cemetery was empty at that hour. I saw old David tending a grave in the distance and the skinny dog that lived around there. I headed to Mr. Cemetery. David's house, which was at the entrance. Dad should be there, working as David's assistant if he wasn't digging a new grave. When I approached, I saw the door open. I quickly hid behind a tomb with Matthew's stroller, and it was then that I saw my husband leave David's house. Alex was tucking his shirt into his pants, running his hand through his hair to fix it. I knew those gestures well. It was at that moment that I understood everything. It was there that he met with Lucy, in the old cemetery caretaker's house, who probably knew everything and covered for them. Maybe it had even been his idea, who knows. I was paralyzed, unable to move. Alex passed a few meters from me, but he didn't see us. He was whistling under his breath, satisfied, like a cat that had just drunk milk. He left, probably back to the store to pretend he had worked late. When I could move again, my legs were shaking so much that I had to sit on the ground. Matthew started crying, perhaps feeling my anguish. I took him in my arms, pressed him against my chest. Tears ran down my face without me being able to control them. Everything was starting to make sense. David, that man who had changed my father, who had brought Alex into our lives, who knew all our secrets and weaknesses, seemed to be pulling the strings behind every misfortune in my family. I didn't go to Mom's house that day. I returned home, did what I had to do, then put Matthew to bed and sat in the living room, in the darkness, waiting. The baby in my belly moved non-stop, as if he too was uneasy. When Alex arrived late at night, I was still sitting there in the dark. "Hope, why don't you turn on the light?" he asked. I looked at him, at that face I had loved so much, at those blue eyes that once seemed so sincere to me. Now I only saw lies in them. "I know everything, Alex," I said, my voice calmer than I imagined it would be. "I know that you and Lucy see each other at Mr. David's house, and before you come to me with lies, it wasn't anyone who told me. I saw it myself. With these very eyes that look at you now and that one day the earth will eat." He turned as white as wax, opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Finally he managed to say, "What are you talking about? Are you crazy? I saw you leave there today, and I saw Lucy leave before, from the cemetery, a place she always said she hated." Alex ran his hand over his face, thinking quickly. I just went to talk to my grandfather, and your sister must have gone to see your father." "You're imagining things, Hope. It's the pregnancy that's affecting your head." I had heard that before. It was always the same excuse. That I was crazy, imagining things, that the pregnancy was confusing me. But this time I was sure. "Don't lie to me anymore," I said. "I can't stand any more lies. I'm leaving." I had never spoken to Alex like that before. Alex stared at me for a while. Then I saw that something changed in his face. "I'll be the one who leaves if you keep accusing me." He turned his back on me and left me talking to myself. He went to take a bath. I, being tired, decided to go to sleep. After that night, I thought I had been foolish to reveal what I had seen. Now surely he would warn Lucy and they would no longer meet there. They would just find another place, be more careful. I was so devastated, but I didn't even imagine that this horror story would still have worse chapters. I felt helpless, without ground. Alex continued living in our house, sleeping in our bed, though he no longer touched me, and I pretended nothing was happening when neighbors came or when someone asked how the marriage was going. "All well, thank God," I would respond with a fake smile. It was what we learned to do in those days, keep problems inside the house, but I needed to vent to someone before I exploded. I decided to seek out Ellen, the only person who already knew my suspicions about Lucy, the only one I trusted to tell my deepest secrets. Her husband worked at his father's pharmacy, and she was at home most of the time. A few days later, Grandma Dorothy had come to my house to prepare a special porridge for me. She said it was good for the baby to grow strong. I needed to go to the market, but I didn't want to take Matthew. I was almost 8 months pregnant, with a huge belly, and he was in that phase of wanting to run everywhere and ask for everything he saw. "Grandma, can you look after Matthew for me while I go to the market?" I asked her. "Of course, my child," she replied, taking my boy in her arms. "But don't take too long and don't carry weight, huh? Those pains of yours are no joke." I left relieved to have some time alone. I wanted to go to the market first, and on the way back, stop by Ellen's house. I bought only the essentials. It was the end of the month, and money was already scarce. A few bags that I could carry without much weight. When I arrived at Ellen's house, I entered directly, as I always did. We had that custom in those days, especially among close friends. The doors always had a wooden latch, no locks. As soon as I entered the yard, I heard voices and realized that my friend was not alone. I found it strange. It was a weekday. Surely her husband was at work. But then I recognized the voice. It was my husband's. My heart pounded hard in my chest. What would Alex be doing there at that hour? He should be in the store working. That fear, that distrust. I decided to find out. I went to the house door and tried to open it, but it was locked from the inside. It was then that I peeked through the side window. It was made of wood and had some loose boards. I could spy. And there I saw the most terrifying scene of my life, something that changed my existence forever. This is the entire first part of the story. Dear friend, if you want to know how this story continues, comment part 2, so I know you want to keep listening to my tale. And please, don't leave without leaving your like before you go.